Hey everyone, what's going on? If you're new to the channel, please check out some links in the description, and I hope it will help you understand this video a little bit better. But what I normally talk about on this channel is esoteric knowledge practices such as gematria and Kabbalah, and basically how everything in the world is connected, everything is interrelated, and if you have a better understanding of these knowledges or these practices, then you can understand the way that the world works a lot better, and you can see that there is a deeper meaning to the world that we are living in. But with all that being said, there are people who understand this knowledge to a great extent and are using it to control the world. You know, a lot of our mainstream media is all scripted, and you know, these people understand how this knowledge works, and they understand how to rule over the world by scripting news stories and scripting the sports leagues, among other things, you know. And what I'm going to show in this video is how when I pick apart these news stories with this esoteric knowledge, I also can see how it is connected to my own personal life. And I do this all of the time because this is the way the world works. Everything is truly related. Everything is connected. People often ask me how I can figure out some of the things that I do, and it always is because of what I'm going to show in this video. I mean, 9 times out of 10, the reason I figure something out is because of some odd thing that happens to me, you know, like a synchronicity. And I'm not going to explain what synchronicity is, but you can just watch some of my other videos. But tonight, or today even, one of the big stories I kept seeing, it was on CNN, it was on Yahoo, it was on ESPN. It was the story about Spike Lee, the documentary guy, and he's a big New York Knicks fan, but supposedly there was something to do with the Madison Square Garden security, and he had this big problem, and now he says he's done with the Knicks over this thing. And if you've been following what I've been talking about recently, and I mean, I've been blogging about it like crazy, I've been talking about it for a number of years, how the Houston Rockets are synced up to China, and it's also synced up to the death of Kobe Bryant. And it was synced up to Kobe Bryant even before he died, but, you know, Kobe dies, then we have the coronavirus, and originally the first symptoms were on Dwight Howard's birthday. And if you remember, Dwight Howard was on the Lakers the same season that Kobe Bryant tore his Achilles. Check out my previous video. But in Hebrew, the word, if you translate it, supposedly COVID means Kobe. You know, Kobe was buried in Corona del Mar. The word corona means crown. Kobe had the big crown tattoo on him. And a number of other things, you know. It's synced up to the Houston Rockets from 2017 that I was talking about, when China Thomas died, Isaiah Thomas's sister, and she died in King County, Washington, and Isaiah Thomas was a former Sacramento King when he first came into the league, and it was synced up to DeMarcus Cousins tearing his Achilles, and DeMarcus Cousins also originally was the Sacramento King. And of course, Kobe Bryant synced up to LeBron, who is King James, who won the NBA Finals for the Cleveland Cavaliers on the anniversary of the real King James's birthday in history in 2016. And a Cavalier is also a follower of King Charles, who was the king during the English Civil War and was also the son of King James. You know, so there's a major narrative with king symbolism, and it's synced up to the Houston Rockets and China. That's why all of this stuff is going on. And hopefully that makes sense. But what was interesting is this game that Spike Lee went to, of course, it was the Houston Rockets versus the New York Knicks. And, you know, right away in gematria, when I look at Spike Lee's name, it equals 44, just like Rockets. And it was also on the date of 3/2, and Rockets, or Houston, equals 32. It was also the 62nd day of the year. Spike Lee's full name, Shelton Jackson Lee, equals 62. He's 62 years old, and this thing with the Knicks at the Houston game was on the 62nd day of the year, which that will get even better here in a second, but I want to point out that his birthday is also 20/3, like 203, and Houston Rockets equal 203. He was also complaining how that's the way he's been entering Madison Square Garden for 28 years. Rockets also equal 28 in gematria. And he brought up the stuff about Charles Oakley. And remember, Charles Oakley got arrested at the New York Knicks game. He was the former Knicks player. That was in 2017. And in 2017, that was the year I was following this major space theme and how it synced up with the Houston Rockets in China. And then China Thomas died. And so on. 2017. The Knicks played the Los Angeles Clippers on this game that Charles Oakley got kicked out of, which is interesting because they're a big piece to a lot of the narrative that's going on. But I thought it was funny when I looked this back up, Charles Oakley's getting arrested at the New York Knicks game. It happened on the date of 2/8 in 2017, which is the 39th day of the year. And I just did this video with Simple Truth TV, and he was talking all about the Boston Celtics and the number 39 and how it synced up to Kemba Walker, who is now the Boston Celtics player and whatnot. And Kemba Walker equals 39 in gematria. And I think it was the coaches, whatever the coach's name, Brad something of the Boston Celtics, his name equals 39. And there was something to do with his 39th win. I can't remember. In the NBA Finals, I believe. But he was talking about 39 and so on. So I just thought it was interesting. This was on the 39th day of the year. New York equals 39. The abbreviation that they use for Madison Square Garden equals 39. 39 is this really important number that is synced up to, to New York and so on. I mean, I've documented tons of things. All of the Super Bowls with New York, they're all synced up to the number 39. And in regards to the game tonight, against the Houston Rockets. Let me find it here. Or it was last night. Well, I'll just tell you because I don't want to pull it up. My internet goes too slow. But the Rockets lost to the Knicks, and they stayed on 39 wins on the season, right? So another 39. And I decided to look up. So these two controversies were from Spike Lee and Charles Oakley. The two controversies were with the owner of the New York Knicks named James Dolan. And what stuck out to me was his birthday was May 11th. And if you go back to 2017 when the Houston Rockets got eliminated from the playoffs, it just so happened to be on May 11th against the San Antonio Spurs on James Dolan's 62nd birthday. And think of how this story comes on the 62nd day of the year. Spike Lee's full name equals 62, and he's 62 years old. And notice the Rockets lost by 39 points. What are the odds of that? The Rockets lost by 39 points on the New York Knicks owner's birthday, and it's all synced up to 39. He was 62 years old. And San Antonio Spurs also equals 62 at gematria. Think about that. Houston, Texas equals 62 at gematria. This guy, James Dolan, his name's 59, and his full name's 175, just like how Houston Rockets equal 59 and 175. So, oddly enough, this story, it's synced up to Houston Rockets, right? That's why they were playing the Houston Rockets and so on. And I also pointed out that Charles Oakley, that story was on the same day that James Dolan's uncle, Larry Dolan, had a birthday. And Larry Dolan is the guy who owns the Cleveland Indians. And this Charles Oakley stuff happened the season after the Cleveland Indians had lost in the World Series to the Chicago Cubs, right? So, and that was all synced up to LeBron James, King James, and so on, right? LeBron's from Cleveland. Cleveland won their first sports championship in 51 years, and Cleveland equals 51, and LeBron James equals 51, and Cleveland Cavs equal 51. They play in Quicken Loans Arena. Quicken Loans equals 51. Bunch of other stuff. You know, it was all synced up to LeBron wearing the Undertaker shirt. And then after they won, he wore the Ultimate Warrior shirt to troll the Golden State Warriors, right? And the Ultimate Warrior, I can't even remember, he died when the Undertaker's streak was broke or something like that. Yeah, he died around at the same time that the Undertaker's streak was broke, and Undertaker was 51 years old when the Cleveland Cavaliers won the NBA Finals. And then later that year, they went to the White House on the day leaving 51 days in the year, the same day that Donald Trump went to the White House for the first time after winning the election. And Donald Trump's national convention was held in Cleveland. But anyway, in my post about Charles Oakley, I mentioned, well, I don't have it on here right now, but in the post where I talked about Charles Oakley, I didn't document it until a few days later because we got the death of a guy named Fab Melo who played for Syracuse. And it reminded me of Carmelo Anthony, who also played for Syracuse when he played in college. Fab Melo, Carmelo. They even call Carmelo Melo sometimes, right? And Carmelo Anthony was important to the Houston Rockets. Remember last year, Carmelo Anthony signed with the Houston Rockets, who have Mike D'Antoni, who used to be the New York Knicks coach, and they didn't get along and so on, right? So I knew there's a riddle with Carmelo Anthony, and he now plays for the Portland Trail Blazers, and I just was like, there's something to that, because Kobe Bryant, the day after Kobe Bryant died, the first game that the Lakers played was against the Portland Trail Blazers. And of course, in gematria, Portland Trail Blazers equal 243. Well, let's type it out here really quick. Portland Trail Blazers equal 243, and also 126, like the day that Kobe Bryant died. And Kobe Bean Bryant equals 243, and he died on January 26th. And you know, he tore his Achilles 126 days after Dwight Howard's birthday, and that was synced up to the annulled Chris Paul trade the year before on Dwight Howard's birthday, and Chris Paul's born on the 126th day of the year, and DeMarcus Cousins tore his Achilles on 126 in 2018, and DeMarcus Amir Cousins equals 126, and he played for New Orleans. New Orleans equals 126, and he tore his Achilles against the Houston Rockets. And Kobe Bryant also tore his Achilles 1 month and 26 days after Jerry Buss died. And think about how this year, how Joanne Buss died. And that's the same year Dwight Howard was on the team. You know, Dwight Howard was on the team when Jerry Buss died. Now Dwight Howard's on the team again. And then Joanne Buss dies just before Kobe Bryant. So there's this huge narrative that I'm talking about. Portland Trailblazers, I was like, how interesting, right? And Portland Trailblazers also are RIP City. Think about that. Then the Lakers play them first after Kobe Bryant dies. RIP City, RIP, Kobe Bryant, and so on. It's such a joke. But I figured I would look up Carmelo Anthony. You know, I'm just kind of going through how I do these blog posts and how I make these videos. And when I was reading about Carmelo Anthony, I noticed that he's in this movie called Amazing, which is a Chinese movie. And it came out in 2013, the same year that Kobe Bryant tore his Achilles. And the other players that are in the movie are Dwight Howard. Odd. Dwight Howard. Just telling you how Dwight Howard's super important to this narrative. Dwight Howard even left the Lakers to go play for the Houston Rockets in 2013. And Mike D'Antoni was the coach of the Lakers when Kobe Bryant tore his Achilles. And then he later on started coaching the Houston Rockets. And the other player was Scottie Pippen in this movie. So 3 NBA players, right? Scottie Pippen, this Chinese movie synced up to the coronavirus and whatnot. And I was like, Scottie Pippen, if you remember, Scottie Pippen also was traded to the Houston Rockets. After the Bulls three-peated, then the Houston Rockets won 2 NBA Finals, then the Bulls three-peated again, and then there was the lockout and Michael Jordan retired and the Bulls traded Scottie Pippen to the Houston Rockets, right? And as I was looking at his deal, he also later played for the Portland Trail Blazers. And I was thinking, All right, Carmelo Anthony connected to the Rockets, connected to the Portland Trail Blazers. Scottie Pippen connected to the Rockets after the Bulls, connected to the Portland Trail Blazers. And then I looked up at the TV, and I'm not even joking, I stopped for like 1 second as I was thinking about it. I looked up at the TV, and there was this AT&T commercial on, and it was all about the Houston Rockets. And let's see here, I'm going to find it really quick, and I'm just going to play it, because I want to show you that, I mean, it's literally about the Houston Rockets. And I'll just play it real quick, and then you can, hopefully you can hear it. Okay, I don't think you can hear it. I can barely even hear it on my own, but the quality is like terrible for some reason, and it wouldn't upload to my blog. But what's interesting about that, he mentions Clyde Drexler right away. He says something about Clyde Drexler. That is a metro pass that Clyde Drexler stepped on. And then he talks about the Bulls' old mascot, Benny the Bull. And then he talks about the 1995 Houston Rockets championship. And I thought, what are the odds of all this? I'm documenting about the Houston Rockets in this blog post, and I stop and look up at the TV, and there's a commercial right when I look at the TV that's all connected to the Houston Rockets. And I was like, dude, Clyde Drexler, yeah, he played for the Houston Rockets, but he's also mostly known for playing for the Portland Trail Blazers. What are the odds of that, right? You know, I'm telling you, if you follow synchronicity and pay attention to the things that happen in your own life, you can understand more about the actual script of the world that's going on, you know. Whether people are, you know, purposely scripting things, which I know they are, but, you know, you can still understand this knowledge if you pay enough attention to your own life. You can see just how it is scripted and how it all comes together. But I was looking up Clyde Drexler, so you know, made me look up Clyde Drexler, and right away I noticed he's from he was born in New Orleans, which is a big narrative. New Orleans 126. That's where Zion Williamson's from. Zion Williamson is really important to this narrative because we were following a lot with August 11th and how it syncs up to Israel and Tisha B'Av, and just if you see my other video, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But I then read more into it, and it says he's born in New Orleans, but he lived in South Park, Houston, Texas. South Park, Houston, Texas. What are the odds of this? Like, if you go to the last video I put out before I started making videos again here, I talked about how South Park was important to the Houston Rockets and China because the Houston Rockets had that episode called Mexican Joker, and then the next episode was how they were going to China, and then the next episode after that they were talking crap on China and whatnot, and people didn't even realize what they were doing is Cartman had to chase this pig, or Cartman turned into a little pig, and the reason for that was because it's a Chinese pig year and the Chinese astrology, right? And most people wouldn't pick up on that, but that's what was going on. But it was Mexican Joker, and then they had this controversy with China, and then the same day that the movie Joker came out, the Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey had tweeted about China and whatnot, and that caused this big controversy. And if you go back and look at that episode, even the one where South Park goes to China 2 days before Daryl Morey tweeted about China and the Joker movie came out, go back and watch that episode when he's flying to China. Randy, this guy right here, he's flying to China to try to get China to sell his weed or whatever. On the plane is NBA players. What are the odds of that? NBA players before Daryl Morey tweets about it, right? And it was James Harden, LeBron James, and I think it was like Will Barton of the Denver Nuggets, right? What, James Harden and LeBron James, the Houston Rockets. LeBron James, the guy synced up to all the King symbolism. But just ask yourself, why would they have NBA players on this plane? Why would they make that a big deal on that plane? And then 2 days later, Daryl Morey tweets about China, and it makes this big controversy. It's all because of this. And what I pointed out in this video as well is that Batman shooting in Aurora, Colorado, that happened just before Kobe Bryant's 34th birthday. Actually, 34 days before Kobe Bryant's birthday. In the previews of that midnight showing, they showed the building that said Aurora on it. And that was in the movie Skyfall, the James Bond movie. But the building said Aurora on it. And then later, at that midnight showing in Aurora, Colorado, there was a shooting supposedly. But that building that said Aurora on the movie Skyfall, that building just so happened to be the Aurora Plaza that was in China. So what are the odds? I have this synchronicity. Keep saying what are the odds, but it is. That's how I always feel. What are the odds? I have this synchronicity. I look up Clyde Drexler, and then I find out he's from South Park, Houston, Texas. South Park. And it just reminded me because not even a week, I think it was a week or two ago, my friend Cody was in town, and he hasn't been in town forever, and I couldn't do anything until later that night, and he kept texting me to come to the bar. And then at like 10 o'clock, I was like, all right, I can come down to the bar for a while, and I texted him, and he said, all right, blah, 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 and then I went to the bar like probably 15 minutes later, and he wasn't there. And then I kept texting him, and I called him, and he never answered because apparently he went home and passed out, or at his mom and dad's. And I was like, well, what the heck, So I just stayed at the bar because the bar owner kept buying me beers. And this other kid who works at the bar, he played a song by South Park Mexican. And I had no idea who the song was by. And there was only like 5 people at the bar. And this girl was like, telling me it was SPM, and I was like, what's SPM? I don't even know what that means. And then they told me South Park Mexican, and they couldn't believe that I didn't know who it was because I'm in bands and DJ, and and I was like, well, I've heard of it, but I don't know anything really about South Park Mexican, So I just thought that was funny, and then I started thinking tonight, I was like, how did I not even think about that guy before, considering it was the Mexican Joker with South Park, and then, South Park Mexican. And South Park Mexican, the rapper, just so happens to be a Houston rapper because he lived by South Park, Houston, right? So, just ridiculous. His real name's Carlos Coy, that equals 39 and 51. Just like South Park, just like Batman, just like how the word Mexican equals 39. And remember, earlier tonight, or earlier when I was talking about this, the Rockets stayed on 39 wins. And the Charles Oakley stuff was on the 39th day, and New York equals 39. Right? So, what is going on? I don't even know how to fix this. I hate, my computer does this all the time. Come on. Anyway, I just started thinking, I was like, there's something interesting to just Houston, maybe. It doesn't even have to necessarily be connected to the Houston Rockets. There's a South Park, Houston, right? And I still don't know. I'm still just trying to figure it out. I don't know that much about Houston, really, But, think about it. Like, the Astros cheating stuff, that's still really big in the news. That came out back in January, right? January 13th, which, Kobe Bryant equals 113 and Michael Jordan equals 113. The National Basketball Association equals 113. In 2017, I thought the or the Rockets were going to win the NBA Finals because of all the space coding and so on. But I mentioned how it was possibly synced up to the Astros winning the World Series. And then the Astros did go on to win the World Series. And, now the Astros are getting that championship taken away because of their cheating stuff. So I was just like, I wonder if there's something connected to Houston. And lately I've been following a lot of these Francis Bacon ciphers because they've just been really important, and I've noticed like they're worth like no other. And I just figured I'd type out Houston, Texas, and I noticed it equaled 195. And if you go to the video that I made the other night with Simple Truth TV, the instantly the first thing I noticed when he was talking about Kimball Walker was that Kimball Walker equals 195. And so does Boston Celtics. Boston Celtics equal 195. And what was so interesting was the night before, I had documented a bunch of stuff about the 195. I kept seeing it and I didn't know what the deal was. There was a story about Roman Polanski and the French Oscars. French Oscars 195. Joe Biden won South Carolina that equaled 195. There was a story about Draymond Green being ejected at the Lakers game, and LeBron was trying to hide his laughter or something. And then I typed in Israel for some reason, I can't remember why, and I saw Israel was 195. And I was just like, oh, interesting, there's a bunch of 195 going on. And then I made that video with him, and he's pointed out how Boston Celtics, the Boston Celtics and Kimball Walker, and Boston Celtics equal 195, and Kimball Walker equals 195. And I just find it interesting, that's telling me to pay attention to this. It's been telling me to pay attention to 195, and I think I finally just figured out why I need to see 195. It's because it's connected to Houston, Texas. And once again, it doesn't necessarily have to be just for the Rockets. It is connected to Houston, and maybe that's what I'm supposed to see with it. The only thing I can think of in regards to Houston that I have any personal connection to is interesting because it's connected to Batman as well. One of my good friends from high school, we call him Norm, but his real name's Joel McCall. And his brother lives in Houston. And I don't know his brother that well, but his brother came back for his wedding that I was in. And I'll explain this in a second, but what's interesting about it is that my friend Norm, the only midnight showing of a movie that I have ever been to just so happened to be the Batman shooting night, the Dark Knight Rises. We went to Harlan, Iowa, and we watched the Batman movie, a bunch, 4 or 5 people. And we went to the bar, we got super drunk, one of the drunkest nights I've ever been, honestly. And I even noticed, though, in the movie, how right before the football thing, it said 3-2-2. And I was trying to tell them about it, but everyone's drinking and no one really cares and no one understands anything I'm talking about. But I was like, it's 3-2-2, that's the Skull and Bones number. And I was trying to tell them about John Kerry and George Bush. And, they just weren't having it. No big deal. At the time, I was just like, well, I'll just keep this to myself then. And so on. But it's just interesting. That was Norm's birthday. And back in November, I documented about this because I was following a whole bunch with Batman. And I was at band practice, and my friend Sturgill had texted me, happy birthday. And it was days after my birthday. And I was like, well, yeah, my birthday was on Sunday, but thanks. But I think it was because I didn't have service at the time, so the message didn't come through for 3 days. But when I got home, this guy named Gary Crane had added me on Facebook, and I thought, I don't even know who he is, but apparently he's from around the area that I live. A bunch of people actually do know him, but just thought it was interesting. He's the only friend request, and he's from Aurora, lives in Aurora, Missouri. And I thought, well, that's interesting because my friend Sturgill went to that Batman movie with us, and I don't know, I just thought it was interesting. And I blogged about how at Norm's wedding we all had to wear these Chuck Taylors, and they all had different shoestrings. Let me find it here. Yeah, I talked about I have a pair of Chuck Taylors with orange shoelaces that I wore for Norm's wedding at my old house because my shoes were blown out, like Zion Williamson's really, but they really were. They were just falling apart, and I wore them for 6 months at least. And at work, they kept giving me crap about my shoes being blown out. And I was like, well, I have another pair. I don't want to go buy one. I have these Chuck Taylors somewhere at my old house. And no big deal. I just documented about it because it kind of came up at work about getting new shoes. And I was like, well, I have a new pair somewhere, but I just got to go find them. And then a week later, I went and found my old shoes. And they were super dirty, so I didn't wear them for a few days, and I put them through the washing machine. And then I decided to wear them to work. And the day that I wore them to work, my friend Norm, I went into the cooler and I came back out and my friend Norm was standing there with his wife. And the first thing he said was, "Nice shoes." And I said, "I swear to you, I have not wore these shoes since the day of your wedding." And I hadn't. I have not wore them shoes since the day of his wedding. I walk out of the cooler the first day that I'm wearing them, and he's standing there. And it is very odd because I haven't seen him for a really long time at that time because he lives in Rochester, Minnesota now. His wife is, I think she's going to medical school, so it's just crazy, I haven't seen him in forever. I wear these shoes for the first time, since his wedding. And of course, I see him that day, the day that I wear these shoes. So that's what synchronicity is. And I noticed that Norm equals 86. His real name is Joel McCall, that equals 86. Rochester, Minnesota, where he lives, equals 86. This was synced up to my Uncle Barney, who went to the Mayo Clinic, then died in a mysterious car crash, and so on. But Adam West, the original Batman, equals 86, and James Egan Holmes, the Batman shooter, equals 86, in Aurora, Colorado, equals 86. So I knew there was something significant to it. And that's why I wrote it in this blog post tonight, because it just makes me wonder about his brother that lives in Houston. Maybe that's the only personal connection I have to Houston. So there might be other Houston connections that I'm just missing because I just don't know that much about Houston. I've never even been there. So then I wondered about the Portland Trail Blazers, right? For obvious reasons, Portland Trail Blazers. So I went to my blog and I typed in Portland Trail Blazers because I knew that they were the team that the Lakers played just after Kobe Bryant died. And the first thing that popped up was this post about Brandon Roy. And Brandon Roy, the former Portland Trailblazer who had the bad knees and whatnot, when the Houston Rockets got knocked out of or were playing the San Antonio Spurs, which is my friend Norm's favorite team too, by the way. But when they were playing the San Antonio Spurs in 2017 and they got knocked out of the playoffs, Brandon Roy supposedly got shot in the foot in Los Angeles. And look at Brandon Roy here. Brandon Roy, 126. Portland Trailblazers, 126. And I pointed out it came just after the Rockets had beat the Spurs with 126 points. And the Warriors ended up going on to win that NBA Finals. And the space theme was really important to the death of Eugene Cernan, the last guy to walk on the moon. And I documented about this in November of 2016. And then Eugene Cernan died on January 16th of 2017. And, Portland equals 116, just like the date of Eugene Cernan dying. Eugene Cernan just happened to die 1 month and 26 days before his birthday. 126. So the space theme is really important still. And this year's the 51st anniversary of the moon landing that happened on the anniversary of the Batman shooting, right? And the word moon equals 51. It's the 51st anniversary. Conspiracy 51. Tinfoil hat 51. Area 51. Oh, the list goes on. Gray aliens equal 51. I think reptilians equal 51. Something like that. Just tons of 51 with conspiracy stuff. 9/11 equals 51. 9/11. 9/11 is something that they wanted people to know about. I know it's scripted, but they wanted people to figure this out. I'm telling you. And it sounds strange, but they wanted people to figure it out so they could control a bunch of people with this narrative, They wanted people to say 9/11 was an inside job a whole bunch of times, If you look at inside job 156, 156 prime is 9/11, and the one guy can't think of his name right now, but he says it's a 30-year conspiracy. And then the other guy said, oh, I can't even think of what I'm talking about, but I think it's the guy from Nebraska on the Warren Commission. He says it's a 30-year conspiracy. And then the guy interviewing the thing cuts and he's like, oh, Article 3, Section 3 or something like that, It's like, just like when they had Prince saying in 1999 saying Osama bin Laden getting ready to bomb. that video was obviously edited. They wanted people to hear that, right? They're controlling this truth community. They control the truth community. They control the normal people. They control everything. And you have to understand that when you're understanding this knowledge. You have to break away from what is going on. You have to understand that everything is connected and everything happens for a reason. The day that Eugene Cernan died too, that's what I was going to get at here. But just sometimes I just go off on these random things because people need to understand this. Like, I feel like, there's a lot of people who are just kind of entering the truth movement, and you have to understand that 9/11 was purposely created to be a conspiracy theory. It's just so obvious that it was, and they make movies and everything else, and then they got guys like Alex Jones and whatnot who take it over, right? And then people start following it, and it's all this controlled movement. And when you understand gematria, you do see that is going on, right? Hopefully that makes sense. But if you understand gematria, you can see how they even control the truth community. But what I was talking about with this is that Eugene Cernan died the same day that the Warriors had scored 126 points over the Cleveland Cavaliers. And that game was really big with 35. Like, I can't remember what it was, but, Kevin Durant wore number 35 and King James equals 35. And I think it was something to do with, like, when the Cavaliers had 35 points or something. Draymond Green, like, got in a fight with LeBron James or bumped LeBron James. There was some controversy. But I can't remember that part exactly, but the Warriors won by 35 points that day. And what I talked about way back when was that NASA equaled 35 and China equaled 35. And I just noticed that Brandon Roy, he is currently 35 years old if you look him up. So 35. We also had the death of John Glenn in 2016, just before Eugene Cernan died. And John Glenn died on Dwight Howard's birthday, 175 days before the NBA Finals. And remember, Golden State equals 175, Los Angeles Lakers 175, Houston Rockets 175, Detroit Pistons 175. That's why it was important that Isaiah Thomas's sister died, named China, because it was synced up to Isaiah Thomas, the Detroit Pistons player who's good friends with Magic Johnson, and Isaiah Thomas equals 175, and Isaiah Thomas, the Boston Celtic, his name and Francis Bacon equaled 175. And NASA also equals 175 in satanic gematria. And NASA, if you write out NASA and simple gematria, I believe it is, it equals 666. That's why it's important, right? And NASA is really important to the number 95 as well. Can't remember what it is, but it's actually it's important because John Glenn died at the age of 95, and if you write out 600, let's type it out here, 666, it equals 95. And if you remember, was it last summer, there was a guy named Chris Kraft who died at the age of 95 that was important to NASA as well, and he died on 7/22, this day that's important to Pi. And John Glenn died 144 days after his birthday, and that guy died 144 days after his birthday, and Eugene Cernan died 144 days after the date that Neil Armstrong died, the first and the last guys to walk on the moon. And the first 144 digits after the decimal of pi, if you sum them, they equal 666. And in the satanic gematria, let me pull it up really quick. Satanic, if you type out the word pi, it equals 95, right? So over 666 equals 95. John Glenn and Chris Kraft died in age 95. NASA, I think I said NASA equals 666. It's actually just the full name of NASA, national, or whatever it is. I can't something aeronautics, space administration. If you write that out, it equals 666. But isn't it interesting, too, that the word pi in Francis Bacon equals 51 and 57? I'm talking about how it's important to all the stuff is important to the moon and Batman shooting. Moon equals 57 and 51. You know what else equals 51 in regards to 666 and whatnot? The word God equals 51 in Frank Baconus. So, just interesting, you know. God, it's interesting with Kobe Bryant stuff too, but God in the Francis Bacon ciphers equals 81 as well. And Satan equals 81 and just Francis Bacon. So, there's all that bridge symbolism and Kobe Bryant that I talked about in the last video. So anyway, moving on here. Hold on, let me pause my TV, turn back on. But I also documented about in the video with Simple Truth TV for the random reason I mentioned how Nick Van Exel was my favorite player and so on. And there was a kid that I went to Iowa Western with who played on the basketball team named Brandon Morris. And I'm bringing this up just because, like, for some reason, one of my best friend told me that he played for the Houston Cougars after he left Iowa Western, but he didn't. He went to the University of Milwaukee. But, there is a player that was in like 2013 that played for Houston, though, that was named Brandon Morris. So I just thought that was interesting, you know, and that's where Hakeem Olajuwon played. Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler played for Houston. They even played on the same team together and whatnot. And uh, Patrick Ewing, the New York Knicks player, he actually beat Hakeem Olajuwon's Houston Cougar team in the 1984 college basketball tournament, right? And then Hakeem Olajuwon went on to be the first pick in the draft, and he joined Ralph Sampson, and they became the Twin Towers. And then wrestling, Hakeem is also one of the Twin Towers with the Big Boss Man. So there really could be something synced up to the Houston Cougars in the March Madness tournament. I haven't watched one college basketball game this year, so, you know, I guess I'll have to check them out. I don't know anything about them whatsoever, so they're an interesting team. I'm interested to see what happens with them in regards to the Final Four tournament and whatnot. But anyway, so after I'm doing all of this stuff, I look at the TV again, and they're talking about Caris LeVert scoring 51 points against the Boston Celtics tonight. And I'm thinking, what are the odds? The Boston Celtics of all teams, you know? When I was talking about the Celtic stuff, the Rockets, before they won any NBA Finals, they were in the NBA Finals 2 times. It was 1981 and 1986. And they lost to the Boston Celtics both times, right? And also Isaiah Thomas, the Detroit Pistons player that I mentioned earlier, he tore his Achilles before the Rockets won their first ever NBA Finals. But Caris LeVert scores 51 points against the Celtics. Well, would you believe what Caris LeVert's name equals? Oh, it equals 51, right? Oh, the odds. And he wears the number 22, and Boston equals 22. Celtics don't equal 22. I need to erase that. But Boston equals 22. Caris LeVert's full name, would you believe it equals 195? This number synced up to Houston. It also, Boston Celtics equal 195. You know, Kemba Walker equals 195. It's craziness. I know it's important just because, I'm telling you, haven't seen this number at all. And then I mentioned it a few days ago. Do a live stream, talk about the number 125. Like he talks about the number 195. And then now I just keep seeing it, you know. Random stories. Caris LeVert, 195 against Boston Celtics. The game also went to overtime, right? And it reminds me of Super Bowl 51 that was held in Houston. The Super Bowl that went to overtime. And the reason this game went to overtime was because the Celtics scored 51 points in the fourth quarter. And then the game went to overtime, and I don't know what I was doing here. The game went to overtime with a score of 118 to 118. Celtics equal 118. For some reason, I wrote 88. So interesting stuff. So just wanted to make a video, showing people how synchronicity is like a big part of how I figure out a lot of these things. And I know I've made countless videos like this, but synchronicity is like super important. If you understand the things that are happening in your life, you can understand the more of the meaning behind the script that actually goes on and the script that people are creating, right? Because everything truly is interrelated. Whether people are making these events happen or not, even if they do, it's still interrelated, and there's something greater that is, helping me along the way to understand this knowledge. Look at this, the French Oscars too. It's talking about how that equaled 195. Roman Polanski was really big because he was in the news on the same day that Charles Manson had a birthday, even though Charles Manson's dead. That was the same day Colin Kaepernick was in the news about trying out for the NFL again and whatnot. But Roman Polanski is important to the Batman symbolism because he was good friends with Jack Nicholson, who is the big Lakers fan, who was also the original Joker in the Tim Burton movies. And when Roman Polanski got arrested for his sexual assault stuff on the 13-year-old, right? Reminding us of Gianna Bryant and whatever, but when he was arrested in Colorado at Jack Nicholson's house, the guy who plays the Joker. And Roman Polanski also has that movie called Chinatown that has Jack Nicholson in it. Or I think Jack Nicholson's in that movie, but Chinatown he's famous for. I talk about how the Charles Manson stuff was synced up to the Beach Boys in their 2020 album that released on the date of 210. China equals 210. Roman Polanski 210. So, I mean, this story by the numbers too. He won the Caesar 194 days after his birthday. Charles Manson equals 194. The Caesars equal 194. With the end date, it was 195 days. And French Oscars equal 195, the way they portrayed it in the media. And it was also 3 months and 16 days after he was last in the media on Charles Manson's birthday. And Charles Manson's real name equals 316, and his birthday is the 316th day of the year. Jesus Christ in Hebrew, that's actually translated to Yeshu, but it equals 316 according to Google Translate. So, one last thing, I just want to point this out really quick. I've been talking a lot about France. If you followed me for the last year, I've talked about France over and over, France. But I was just thinking about it the other day about how, it's spelling and it's all to do with magic, right? And there's curse words, right? And when people curse, they say, "Excuse my French." So, and think about the Illuminati and so on, and the Jesuits and whatever. It's all connected to France. So, it's just interesting, excuse my French, and then that means you're using curse words with your spelling. So, hopefully this video makes sense to most people. Just check out the other videos in the description, and have a good one. Peace.